There's a question, or should I say, somebody asked me a question. Is it okay for black kids to go to private white schools? I found that to be a very fascinating question because it ties in with the same discussion I had a few days back with Billy Selekane, where you are talking about the present education system. I think there are a couple of things that we need to get right or understand before we can even get into that argument. When you take a black child and you take him to a school like St. John's or any of these rich schools, a black boy that is not educated in his Afrocentricity, he does not understand his Africanism. A child that comes from a home that lacks African consciousness, people that don't really understand their identity, people that it's a fruit without roots. It becomes very hard, even if you expose this child to the best education material, to the best teachers, the best schools. It's not the education or the teacher that determines how much the child gets out of class. It is the intentionality of the child that determines how much he'll get. For example, you take a little Lamini that is a son to Lamini Senior that works in Santon in one of the homes, and they all work for Vandamava. Vandamava is a corporate executive. Lamini is the house help. He does a bit of driving, he does a bit of cooking, and he does a bit of gardening. So his son visits his father or goes with his father to work, and he meets Vandamava's son. And out of the kindness of Vandamava Senior's heart, he decides that Lamini Senior has been a very good loyal servant. He's going to educate his son, and he takes his son and he takes him to the same school like Vandamava Junior. Do you think they will have access to the same education? No, they won't, because the intentionality is different. Vandamava Junior, his intention is to rule, to control, and to master the world, because that's the only reference. The context is God seeing his father. His father is in charge. His father's brother or his uncle is in charge. While on the other side, you've got Lamini Jr., where his context is coming from a point of servitude. He sees his father as a servant, as a house help, as a cook, as a driver, as a garden boy. Now he's going to school with the sole intention to find a job or to serve Vandamava Jr. Totally different. Now this brings us to a lot of things that we have to look at. Before we can expose our kids to private white schools, first and foremost, we have to expose them to their Africanism. We have to raise their African consciousness at home. We have to teach, we have to ground them in their roots as African people. Because a child that comes into the same complex in the suburb, they live in Morningside, they live in Santon, they live wherever it is that they live. And then he goes to the same school with the boy's son, but then when they come home, he goes to the servant quarter, and the son goes into the main house. Now, these are two different lives that this boy has to live in one day. He has to pretend to understand what the white lifestyle is, and he has to come back home and try and come in and fit with his parents. It's totally confusing. So what I'm saying here is, before we can send our kids to white schools, we must educate them in our Afronism, our Afro-Africanism. We need to teach them who we are, because grounding is the key. Changing the education won't matter, because what you're deciding to do with education is what determines what you're going to get out of it. And if you're going to school with the sole intention of getting good grades and getting a job, it's a very short term. And that's why you see most black boys are very bored going to school. It's not motivating to go to school with the sole intention of just getting a job. We need more forward thinking. We need to start creating transcendent boys that can start aligning their going to school and the survival of the race, the survival of the people. How does this push the needle forward in terms of African civilization, African protection, African security, African food, and African having a table, a place on that table of the world? And until we start to inculcate that into our children, sending them to school with the sole intention of getting good grades and then being employed, I can tell you for a very long time, we're going to suffer. It's just not right. It is us that are killing our children. It's not the white schools, because we think by sitting near the white kids in white schools, we think we're mistaking growth and being accepted. We think if we are accepted by white children, if they accept us into their environment, then automatically it raises who we are as a people. No, we have to earn that. And to earn that, it goes back to the very basics. We need to understand who we are. Let's not be a fruit without roots. A tree is only identified by its fruits. Otherwise, it's just a tree.